It was a chilly and rainy afternoon when Emma, the owner of a small cafe nestled in the heart of the city, first crossed paths with Daniel. She had been busy all morning, preparing fresh pastries, brewing strong coffee, and ensuring the cafe was ready for the usual lunch rush. As she wiped down the counter, her gaze drifted toward the window, where a soggy figure sat on the curb, hunched under a torn umbrella. Emma had seen him before, this man with wild, unkempt hair and a tattered coat that barely shielded him from the cold. His name was Daniel, though Emma had never spoken to him directly. He was a frequent sight around the cafe, always lingering outside, often asking for change or looking for handouts. Despite his weathered appearance, there was something about him that made Emma pause. He was a regular, but not the type of regular that one could easily forget. His eyes held a quiet sadness, as though he carried a burden too heavy for anyone to understand. On this particular day, Emma noticed something different in the way Daniel sat. He seemed more hunched than usual, almost defeated. She had heard his voice a few times, soft, polite, but today there was no sound from him. She watched for a moment longer, her heart heavy with a sense of helplessness. She knew people like Daniel didn't just need food and shelter. They needed something deeper, something that couldn't be easily handed out. As the rain continued to pour, Emma made a snap decision. She couldn't stand idly by, watching this man struggle in silence. She grabbed an umbrella and, without thinking twice, walked outside into the downpour. It wasn't typical for her to step out into the rain like this, but something inside urged her to act. When she approached Daniel, he didn't immediately look up. He seemed lost in thought, his hands wrapped around his knees as he sat with his head bowed low. Emma stood in front of him, waiting for a moment, unsure of what to say. Finally, she spoke softly, breaking the silence. "Hey," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You look like you could use something warm. How about I get you a coffee?" Daniel looked up, his eyes widening slightly in surprise. For a brief moment, their gazes locked. Emma could see the years of hardship etched in his face, the thin lines around his eyes, the tiredness that seemed to weigh him down. But there was something else there, too, something she couldn't quite place. It was a flicker of hope, or maybe a yearning for something more. He didn't speak right away, and Emma thought for a second that he might decline. But instead, he nodded silently, his voice almost a whisper. "That would be nice," he said. Emma offered him the umbrella and guided him back into the warmth of the cafe. She led him to an empty seat by the window, away from the hustle of the cafe. The moment he sat down, he seemed to release a breath he had been holding for hours, maybe even days. Emma quickly moved to the counter, preparing a warm coffee and a bowl of soup for him. As she worked, she noticed that her hands were shaking slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of what she was about to offer him. It wasn't just food or drink she was offering. It was something more, something intangible. She had seen people like Daniel before, and she knew that offering help wasn't always as simple as it seemed. But today, something inside her told her to try. As she set the steaming cup and soup in front of him, Daniel's eyes softened. He took the spoon into his hands but paused for a moment before speaking. "I don't know what to say," he muttered, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought anyone would offer me something like this." Emma sat across from him, offering him a small smile. You don't have to say anything. Just eat. I'm glad you're here. For the next few minutes, they sat in silence. Emma observed Daniel as he took small, cautious sips from his coffee and spooned the soup into his mouth. It was clear he hadn't had a proper meal in some time. His hands trembled slightly as he ate, but Emma saw something else in his demeanor, a quiet dignity, a part of him that refused to give up, even in the face of everything life had thrown at him. As he finished his soup, Daniel looked up at Emma, his eyes filled with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you, he said, his voice low. I've lost so much. I didn't think anyone cared. Emma leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. I do care, she said. And I think you could use a chance. If you're willing, I could use some help around here. Daniel's eyes widened, as though he couldn't quite comprehend what she was offering. A job? Emma nodded. Yeah, just some light work around the cafe. Cleaning, maybe helping with the dishes. I could use an extra hand, and you could use a fresh start. Daniel looked down at his hands, torn between disbelief and hope. But I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I can do it. Emma smiled gently, her voice reassuring. You don't have to be perfect. Just show up, do your best, and I'll help you. We can figure things out together. It was an offer he hadn't expected, but one he couldn't refuse. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt the stirrings of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn his life around. As Daniel agreed to take the job, Emma felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. It wasn't just about giving a man a job, it was about offering him a chance to find himself again, to restore his dignity. Little did she know, this simple act of kindness would be the beginning of a transformation that would change both of their lives forever. After Daniel accepted Emma's offer, things began to change. The first few days were awkward, with Daniel navigating the new environment of the cafe while trying to adapt to a routine he had long since forgotten. Emma knew this wasn't going to be easy. People don't change overnight, especially when they've been living on the streets for so long. But there was something in Daniel's eyes, something that made Emma believe he had the potential to turn things around. The first task Daniel was given was simple: cleaning. He started by wiping down tables, washing the coffee cups, and sweeping the floors. At first, his movements were slow, hesitant, as though he wasn't quite sure how to handle a mop or what the proper technique was for wiping down counters. The awkwardness was clear in the way he carried himself, almost as though he didn't belong in this neat, warm space. Emma noticed the discomfort. She saw how his hands shook as he gripped the cleaning supplies, how he hesitated to make eye contact with the regulars who came in for their morning coffee. But despite these signs of uncertainty, Emma could sense a quiet determination in him. She decided to give him some space to find his rhythm, and made sure to check in with him from time to time. One afternoon, after a particularly busy lunch rush, Emma decided to pull Daniel aside. She could see that he was still struggling with his self-esteem, that he hadn't quite believed in his own worth. But she also saw glimpses of his potential. The way he handled a difficult customer with patience, the way he took care with each task, no matter how small. She decided it was time to offer him more responsibility. "You've been doing a great job, Daniel," Emma said as she approached him, her tone warm and encouraging. I was thinking, maybe you'd like to try something else. Something a little more challenging. You're learning quickly, and I think you've got the skills to handle it." Daniel looked up at her, his face still shadowed with doubt. "I don't know if I'm ready for anything else," he said quietly, almost apologetically. Emma smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to be ready. You're never going to feel fully ready for something new. But I believe in you. You've got what it takes." After a moment of silence, Daniel nodded. He didn't speak, but Emma could see the glimmer of hope that flickered in his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he was beginning to feel like maybe he could do something worthwhile again. The next task Emma gave him was to help with food prep. She showed him how to chop vegetables for the soup of the day, how to arrange the sandwiches and pastries on the counter, and how to keep track of the cafe's inventory. At first, Daniel moved clumsily, dropping a few slices of cucumber and spilling a bit of flour. But Emma stayed patient with him, never showing frustration, always offering gentle corrections. As the days went by, Daniel's confidence began to grow. He started to pick up the pace. His movements became smoother, more fluid. He learned how to handle the cafe's small kitchen, and soon Emma trusted him with more responsibility. There were moments when he still struggled, moments when he'd forget an order or get flustered by a busy crowd. But each time, Emma was there to guide him, to remind him that mistakes were part of the learning process. Emma also noticed how Daniel was slowly changing outside of work. The first time he asked for help with his appearance, Emma was taken aback. He came to her one morning, looking particularly ragged, and asked if he could borrow some clothes. Emma hesitated for a moment, unsure if he would accept it, but then she realized that this was part of the transformation. He wasn't asking for a handout. He was asking for dignity. "Of course," she said, leading him to the back of the cafe, where she had a small storage area filled with old clothes. Emma picked out a clean pair of jeans and a shirt she had once used for a promotional event. She handed them to Daniel and encouraged him to freshen up in the cafe's back room. When he came back out, wearing the clothes she had given him, Emma almost didn't recognize him. His hair was combed, his face was free of the stubble that had once covered it, and the clothes he wore fit him well. He looked like a different man, someone who had been given a second chance at life. His shoulders were straighter, his head held higher. "You look good," Emma said, smiling warmly. Daniel looked at himself in the mirror, almost in disbelief. I didn't think I could look like this again," he said, his voice soft. Emma chuckled. "You were always capable of looking this good. You just needed the right opportunity." With each passing day, Daniel's transformation continued. He became more and more comfortable in the cafe, gaining confidence in his abilities and finding a new sense of purpose. His work ethic improved, and he began to take pride in the cafe. The regular customers started noticing, too. They began to compliment him on his work, how well he cleaned, how friendly he was, how much the cafe had improved since he started. This positive reinforcement had a profound effect on Daniel. It showed him that he was more than just a homeless man. He was capable of contributing something meaningful. The transformation was slow, but it was undeniable. Emma could see the change in him, not only in his work, but also in his attitude. He was no longer the broken man who had walked into her cafe that rainy day. He was becoming someone new, someone who could stand tall and face the world with pride. And Emma, in her own quiet way, had become his anchor, helping him rebuild a life he once thought he had lost forever. After several months of hard work, Daniel had shown considerable improvement. His confidence had grown, and he had become a reliable, hard-working member of the cafe's small team. Emma, however, was feeling the weight of her responsibilities. Running a cafe was no small task, and she had worked tirelessly for years to build her business. It had been a while since she had taken a break, and she decided that it was finally time for a vacation. She needed some time to recharge, to step away from the day-to-day grind and give herself a chance to relax. As the cafe's owner, Emma knew that leaving the business in the hands of someone else was risky, but she felt confident in Daniel's growth and responsibility. She had witnessed his transformation firsthand. When she first hired him, he had been a broken, homeless man, with no hope, barely able to trust himself. But now he was a different person altogether, a man who had regained his sense of self-worth, who was beginning to rebuild his life. Before she left for her trip, Emma sat down with Daniel one last time to go over a few things. She reviewed the schedule, made sure he knew how to handle any expected deliveries, and gave him a list of tasks to complete. She also explained the cafe's regular routine, how to keep the coffee brewing, how to greet the customers, and how to ensure that the cafe ran smoothly in her absence. "Daniel, I'm leaving for a week, but I'm not worried about the cafe," Emma said with a reassuring smile. "I trust you to take care of everything while I'm gone. You've been doing an amazing job, and I know you'll keep it running just fine." Daniel, though still a bit uncertain about the responsibility, nodded. "I won't let you down. Emma, I'll make sure everything goes smoothly." Emma could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time she felt completely comfortable leaving the cafe in his hands. The growth she had witnessed in Daniel over the past months had been incredible. She had no doubt that he could handle the day-to-day operations of the cafe. His transformation wasn't just about learning how to clean or serve food. It was about reclaiming his dignity, his sense of purpose. And now Emma could see that he was ready for this challenge. With her mind at ease, Emma packed her bags and headed off for her vacation. It was a small trip, just a few days in the countryside, away from the city's hustle and bustle. As she enjoyed the peace and quiet, she checked in with Daniel occasionally via phone. He assured her that everything was going well. The cafe was steady, the customers were happy, and he had even made a few small improvements to the layout of the cafe, something he had been considering for a while. Emma couldn't help but smile. She was proud of him. Back in the cafe, Daniel found that taking on the responsibility of managing the place wasn't as overwhelming as he had feared. There were moments of stress, of course, busy mornings, rush hour, crowds, and the occasional challenging customer. But Daniel was learning how to manage it all. He had come a long way from the man who had stumbled into the cafe seeking help. Now he had a sense of ownership. He made decisions about how to arrange the seating and what specials to feature. He even tried a new recipe for a signature sandwich, which became a hit with the regulars. One evening, as the cafe quieted down after a busy dinner rush, Daniel took a moment to reflect. He thought about how far he had come, from being a homeless man on the street to running the operations of the cafe in Emma's absence. It was more than just a job. It was a lifeline. The cafe had given him structure, purpose, and a sense of belonging. He had never imagined that a simple act of kindness from a stranger could turn his life around so completely. He was still learning, of course. There were challenges every day, and not everything went perfectly. But Daniel had developed a sense of pride in his work. Each morning, he woke up excited to go to the cafe, to see the customers, to try something new. The confidence Emma had shown in him was contagious. It made him want to live up to her expectations, to prove that he wasn't the same man who had first walked into the cafe all those months ago. He had come a long way, and he wasn't about to let Emma down. As the days passed and Emma's vacation drew to a close, Daniel continued to manage the cafe with growing assurance. He worked with the staff, kept everything running smoothly, and even managed to find some time to reorganize a few shelves and improve the layout of the cafe. Emma had given him the tools and the trust to succeed, and he was making the most of it. When Emma finally returned, Daniel felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He knew she would be pleased with the progress, but there was also a small part of him that wondered how she would react to the changes he had made. He was eager to show her that he had taken her trust seriously, that he had worked hard in her absence, and that he had learned from the responsibility she had given him. Emma arrived back at the cafe, her face lighting up when she saw Daniel. He greeted her with a big smile and a sense of pride in his posture. "How was the trip?" Daniel asked, his voice genuine. "Relaxing," Emma replied with a grin. "But I'm excited to see what you've done while I was gone." Daniel gave her a small tour of the cafe, pointing out the improvements he had made. She was impressed with how well he had handled everything in her absence. Not only had the cafe remained intact, but it had also flourished under his care. "Well, Daniel," Emma said as they stood together at the counter, "I can tell you've done a great job. I'm proud of you." Daniel smiled, the pride in his chest swelling. "Thanks, Emma. I couldn't have done it without you." Emma's eyes softened, her voice full of warmth. "You did it yourself, Daniel. You've earned this." It was a moment of recognition for both of them. Emma had trusted Daniel, and in return, he had shown her that trust was not misplaced. He had transformed from a man who was lost to someone with purpose, and Emma knew that this was just the beginning of his new life. Emma's vacation had given her the chance to rest, but nothing could prepare her for the surprise awaiting her when she stepped back into the cafe. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods greeted her as she opened the door, but something felt different. There was an energy in the air that hadn't been there before. The cafe was still the same cozy place she had left behind, but the atmosphere had subtly shifted. It was brighter, more organized, and felt more alive. As Emma walked inside, she noticed the changes right away. The walls were freshly painted, and the furniture had been rearranged in a more inviting way. Even the lighting seemed different, warmer, more welcoming. It was as if the cafe had been given a new breath of life. But the most striking change wasn't in the decor. It was in Daniel. Emma's eyes scanned the cafe, looking for him, and she finally spotted him behind the counter, talking to a customer. He looked so different. She had expected some change, of course, but nothing like this. He was standing tall, his posture straight, his hair neatly styled, and his clothes, a button-down shirt and dark jeans, were clean and pressed. It wasn't just the way he looked, though. It was the way he carried himself. He had the confidence of someone who had found his place in the world. Emma stood for a moment, watching him interact with the customers, a warm smile on his face as he joked with a regular. She felt a deep sense of pride swelling inside her. This was the man she had given a chance to all those months ago, the man who had once been a homeless stranger. And now, he was not only managing the cafe in her absence, but had also transformed the space into something better. She was thrilled, but at the same time, she couldn't quite believe it. Daniel was still talking to the customer when Emma approached the counter. He turned around and immediately froze. His eyes widened as he recognized her. "Emma?" he said, his voice filled with surprise. "You're back." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "I am, and I have to say I'm amazed by what I'm seeing," Daniel chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "I wasn't sure what you'd think. I made a few changes around here. I hope that's okay." "Okay?" Emma's smile grew wider as she took in the transformation. "It's more than okay. It's incredible." Daniel blushed slightly, clearly not used to receiving praise. "I just thought it could use a little sprucing up. You know, something to make it feel new." Emma nodded, still in awe. "It feels different in the best possible way. It feels alive." With a shy smile, Daniel gestured toward the counter. "It's all thanks to you, really. If you hadn't given me a chance, none of this would have happened." Emma's eyes softened. "You did all this, Daniel. I just gave you the opportunity. You made it happen." As the two of them stood there exchanging words, Emma could see how much Daniel had changed. It wasn't just the physical transformation, it was his entire demeanor. He no longer seemed lost or defeated. He stood with confidence, with purpose. He was comfortable in his own skin, and he had taken ownership of the cafe as if it were his own business. Emma had always believed in his potential, but seeing him now in this new light filled her with pride. "I have to say," Emma continued, "it's clear you've really grown, not just in your work, but in who you are. You've become a completely different person." Daniel looked down for a moment, a humble smile tugging at his lips. "I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me a chance when no one else did." Emma reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No, Daniel. You did this. You turned your life around. I just provided a little nudge." The connection between them felt stronger than ever in that moment. Emma realized that she had witnessed something truly special, the power of belief, of second chances. Daniel had not only changed for himself, but he had also breathed new life into the cafe, a place that had become more than just a job for him. It had become a symbol of his transformation, a place where he could find redemption and purpose. As they continued to talk, Emma noticed how much the regulars had come to respect and appreciate Daniel. The customers who had once only known him as the quiet, scruffy man on the street now greeted him by name, chatting with him as if he were an old friend. They praised him for his hard work, and many mentioned how much the cafe had improved since he had taken charge. Emma could see that Daniel had earned the respect of not only the customers, but also the other staff members. Throughout the day, Emma observed as Daniel effortlessly moved through the cafe, handling orders, interacting with customers, and managing the flow of the cafe with a calm and confident demeanor. There was no sign of the nervousness or hesitation that had marked his early days at the cafe. He was in control, and he knew what he was doing. As the day came to a close, Emma sat down with Daniel for a quiet moment. "I'm proud of you," she said sincerely. "You've come so far. You've not only transformed the cafe, but you've transformed yourself." Daniel smiled, a bit of emotion creeping into his voice. "I never thought I'd be here. I never thought I'd be able to do something like this, but I feel like I finally found where I belong." Emma nodded, her heart full. "You've earned this, Daniel. You've proven that anyone can change, that anyone can find their way back, no matter where they start." As the evening shadows began to stretch across the cafe, Emma looked around at the space that had become a symbol of resilience and transformation. It wasn't just a cafe anymore. It was a testament to the power of second chances. Emma knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter for Daniel, and she couldn't wait to see where his journey would take him. Emma's return from vacation had been a surprise in many ways. What she had discovered was beyond her expectations. Daniel had not only managed the cafe with remarkable success in her absence, but he had transformed both the cafe and himself. Yet, as the day wore on, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Daniel's transformation than just hard work and a little guidance. She had always seen potential in him, but today, he seemed to exude a newfound sense of confidence and pride that went deeper than the physical changes. Later that afternoon, as the last of the customers filed out of the cafe, Emma sat down at one of the corner tables with a cup of coffee in hand. She watched Daniel behind the counter, wiping down surfaces, cleaning the espresso machine with care, and humming lightly to himself as he worked. She was proud of how much he had grown. But there was still a curiosity lingering in her mind. The kind of curiosity that pulled at her whenever she thought about the man who had walked through her door months ago. The man who had been homeless, broken, and lost. Emma had seen glimpses of his past in their brief conversations, the stories he would sometimes share about the life he had left behind. He had told her about his job as a mechanic, about his addiction, about the circumstances that led him to the streets. Emma had listened with sympathy, but never pushed for more. She knew he was still carrying the weight of that history, and in his own time, he would open up further. Yet she had never expected him to change so drastically, so quickly. There was something missing in his story, something she didn't understand. As the cafe quieted and the last of the evening rush came to a close, Emma felt it was time to ask. She didn't want to be intrusive, but she felt an undeniable need to know the full extent of Daniel's past. Something inside told her that it wasn't just his work ethic or kindness that had brought him this far. It was something deeper. She waited until Daniel was finished cleaning the counter, and then, with the warmth of the evening light streaming through the windows, she approached him. "Daniel," she began softly, "there's something I've been wondering about. I've seen you change so much since you've been here, and I've been thinking about how far you've come. But I have to ask, you've told me bits and pieces about your past, but there's still so much I don't know." Daniel's smile faltered slightly, and for the first time that day, his eyes dropped to the floor. Emma noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, the brief pause before he spoke. "I guess I haven't shared much about it, huh?" Daniel said, his voice quiet but steady. I suppose I didn't think it was important. I didn't want anyone to see me as the person I was. Emma sat down at the counter, her gaze gentle but insistent. It's not about that. I just think it's important that you know you're not just here because of the work you do. You've become someone I respect, and I want to understand more about the journey that brought you here. Daniel's hands paused as he wiped the counter one last time. He took a deep breath, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes before he looked up at Emma. I don't talk about it much, but I guess I'll start at the beginning. He began, slowly at first, gathering his thoughts as he spoke. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone's business. My parents were both hard workers, and I learned early on that life wasn't easy. I didn't mind it at first. I worked with my dad in the garage, fixing cars, and it gave me a sense of purpose. But things changed when I got older. I got into some bad habits, and I started drinking. It wasn't just drinking, though. I got into some stuff I'm not proud of. Eventually, it spiraled out of control. Emma listened carefully, offering him the space to speak without interruption. Daniel's voice became quieter as he continued, each word laced with a quiet regret that he hadn't fully shared before. I lost my job after I couldn't keep up with the work. My addiction got the better of me, and I found myself alone. No family, no friends, no place to turn. I didn't know what to do. I ended up on the streets, struggling just to survive. I didn't want help from anyone. I thought I didn't deserve it. Emma's heart tightened as she listened, but she didn't interrupt. She could see the pain in his eyes as he relived those moments. But there was a new depth to his words, a rawness she hadn't heard before. Then one day, I found myself sitting outside your cafe, Daniel continued, his eyes flicking to the counter as if to ground himself in the present. I had nothing left. I didn't even know why I came in, but I saw you, and you didn't turn me away. You gave me food and a place to rest, but more than that, you gave me a chance to do something with my life again. You didn't see me as some lost cause, and I think that's what made me want to try. Daniel paused, taking a deep breath. I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I was capable of changing, of doing anything right. But your trust, it meant everything to me. And little by little, I started to believe in myself again. Emma's eyes filled with emotion as she listened. She had known that Daniel's journey had been difficult, but hearing the full extent of his struggles, his battles, and his ultimate desire to change made everything click into place. She understood now. His transformation wasn't just about learning to work at the cafe. It was about healing, reclaiming his self-worth, and finding hope in the darkest of places. You've come so far, Daniel, Emma said, her voice filled with admiration. I had no idea what you had gone through, but I'm so proud of you. Daniel looked up at her, his face softening. I owe it to you, Emma. I'm not the same person I was when I walked in here. I'm still a work in progress, but I'm not where I started. And I'll keep going. I've got something to live for now. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. You've already accomplished so much, Daniel. You've given yourself a second chance, and you've earned it. For the first time in a long while, Daniel allowed himself to fully believe in his own potential. He was no longer the man who had been lost in the streets, searching for a way out. He was a man who had reclaimed his life, and with Emma's belief. In him, he knew that the journey he had started was just the beginning of something greater. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Emma continued to watch Daniel's transformation unfold. What had started as a simple act of kindness, a job offer to a man who had nothing, had turned into something much more profound. It wasn't just about Daniel working at the cafe. It was about how he had slowly rebuilt his life, piece by piece, and reclaimed his dignity. Emma had seen him rise from a place of despair to one of hope, not just in the cafe, but in his own spirit. She couldn't help but feel proud of the man he had become. One morning, as she stood behind the counter, preparing her usual morning coffee, Emma caught a glimpse of Daniel working at the other end of the cafe. He was arranging fresh pastries, his movements fluid and confident, his demeanor calm yet focused. There was no sign of the nervous, unsure man who had walked through her door months ago. Daniel had become a pillar of strength for the cafe, not just in his work ethic, but in his interactions with the customers, with the staff, and with Emma herself. Today, the cafe felt different again, though it wasn't the physical changes, like the new furniture or the updated decor. No, it was the feeling in the air, a kind of settled peace that had taken hold of the space. It was as though the cafe had become a symbol of something larger, the power of second chances, the importance of human connection, and the possibility of transformation. Emma couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. When she first hired Daniel, she didn't expect the ripple effect his presence would have on both of their lives. She had always thought she was offering him a chance at stability, a fresh start. But in truth, Daniel had also given her something precious, a reminder of the value of kindness, the importance of giving people a chance, and the joy of seeing someone grow into their full potential. One afternoon, when the cafe was quiet, Daniel sat down next to Emma as she worked on some paperwork. He had a rare moment of calm and seemed deep in thought. Emma noticed that he wasn't his usual cheerful self. Instead of his typical smile, there was a look of contemplation on his face, and she could sense that he was wrestling with something. "Is everything okay?" she asked, putting her pen down and looking at him. Daniel hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure of how to express what was on his mind. He finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, his gaze focused on the countertop. "About the future, about what's next." Emma raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but also sensing that this was more than just idle conversation. "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, pausing as if weighing his words carefully, "I've been here for a while now, and I've really grown to love this place. But I don't want to just be the guy who works at the cafe forever. I want more. I want to have a real future. I want to get back to what I used to love doing. I want to work with cars again. I miss it." Emma listened intently, her heart going out to him. She knew how important his past had been to him, how much pride he had once taken in his work as a mechanic. For a moment, she saw the young man he used to be, the man who had passion and ambition, who dreamed of fixing engines and getting his hands dirty in the garage. "That makes sense," Emma said, her voice warm and understanding. "I can see how much you miss it. You're not the same person you were when you first came in here, Daniel. But I think it's wonderful that you're thinking about your future. You've already come so far." Daniel looked up at her, a mixture of determination and uncertainty in his eyes. I don't know how to get there, though. I don't have the connections I once had. I don't know where to start. Emma's expression softened, and she gave him a small smile. The first step is deciding what you want. You've already taken that step, and as for the rest, we'll figure it out. You're not alone in this, Daniel. He looked at her with a quiet gratitude. You've done so much for me already. I don't know how to thank you for everything. Emma shook her head, her eyes kind. You don't need to thank me. You've earned this. I'm just here to support you, like I always have. The conversation shifted to more practical matters. Emma offered to help Daniel get in touch with a few people she knew in the automotive industry. She knew there were opportunities for him if he wanted to pursue them, but it would take effort and time. Still, the idea of Daniel returning to his passion lit a fire in her. She knew it was a big step, but she also knew it was the right one. Daniel had found his way back to purpose, but now he needed to find a path forward that felt true to who he was. Over the next few weeks, Emma helped Daniel gather the necessary resources to start looking for a mechanic's job. She reached out to a few of her contacts, who were more than willing to help him get back on his feet. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to work at the cafe, but the thought of his future, of returning to what he loved, gave him an energy and drive that he hadn't felt in years. The day Daniel received his first job offer from a nearby garage, Emma couldn't help but feel a mixture of pride and sadness. She was proud of him, of course. This was the culmination of all his hard work, his transformation, and his perseverance. But part of her would miss him deeply. The cafe had become a home for him, and he had become a vital part of the small community they had built together. When Daniel told her the news, she smiled, but her heart ached just a little. I knew you could do it, she said, her voice filled with warmth. Daniel grinned, a sense of excitement in his eyes. I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me the chance I needed. I'll never forget that. Emma placed a hand on his shoulder. Go make your mark, Daniel. You've already done so much here, but there's a whole world out there waiting for you. I'm excited for what comes next. As Daniel left the cafe for his first day at the garage, Emma stood at the door, watching him go. She felt an overwhelming sense of pride for the young man who had walked into her cafe that rainy day, lost and broken, and had walked out as a man with purpose and a bright future ahead of him. She knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And as the cafe doors closed behind her, Emma smiled, knowing that Daniel's journey had only just begun.